his great talent for storytelling, his sense of humor, his activism. He is a shining light, and I am just so pleased to be able to introduce him and host him here at UWSC. So would you all join me in a warm welcome?
Hello to all my relatives. Laughing Fox is my name. I'm from the Eagle Clan, and Bisquabi Kong in Dunjaba. RedCliff is where I'm from. Today, I have the honor of coming here and presenting some of our Ojibwe culture, some stories, and some of our music. And I'm joined today by talented drummer Zach Hartliff from Mushkazibing, which is Bad River, Wisconsin. We come from the shores of Gitchigumi, from the shores of the Great Lake. And the introduction that I just gave you is kind of like the Ojibwe protocol these days, where I talk to you a little bit in our language and then explain to you a little bit where we're from and so on. I was taught by my elders, that I always have to apologize for speaking English, and any kind of cultural differences that I may talk about today. I'm going to bring up some stories that we usually only tell in winter. And when I left home this morning, there was still snow back where we're at. And so I'm going to touch base on some of our wintertime stories. It's almost coming to an end. And I hope you enjoyed that. And Ninda no Ki'i Bibi Guan, one of the things that I do is I travel around and I give cultural demonstrations, and I talk about the history of the Native American cording flute. And a lot of people, know the flute as a medicine instrument or a healing instrument, and in many cases, a courting instrument. There's all kinds of creation stories for the Bibi Guan, for the Native American flute. And every culture all over Mother Earth, all over Akiwan, has some sort of a flute. It's considered one of the oldest instruments. It's right up there with the drum, and the drum represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth. It's the first rhythm and sound that we hear while we're in our mother's wombs. So that gets incorporated into our culture. Another of the older instruments would be the rattle or the rain stick. It represents water and it represents life, something that we all need to survive. And even older, possibly older, is the human voice. That's another healing instrument that cultures all over the world have used in ceremony and in social gatherings. And the flute, from what I understand, dates back probably about 44,000 years ago. I was just reading an article that talked about a cave bear bone that was made out of a flute. And there's controversy on that subject, but I find it really interesting. And throughout the years, they have excavated different places and have found different types of flutes. So it's always been a part of our culture. Some of the older teachings talk about when different cultures would meet another culture, that they would actually play the flute to signal that they're arriving. So it wasn't just an instrument for love. But the story I'm going to tell and share with you today, as we get going in this presentation, I like to call Tales of Laughing Fox. Laughing Fox is an Ojibwe name. My English name, Michael Charette. And it's an instrument created out of love. And when I first started playing it, I spent about 2 years in the woods playing this instrument before I started to share it with people. And I went to my neighboring town, which is Bayfield, Wisconsin, and I worked as a baker. I was a baker for 20 years, and after I got off of work one day, I sat on the steps of where I worked, and I started to play. And I noticed the effect that this instrument had on people as they're going from one place to another. They slowed down, they took a moment and they listened. And then they came up to me and they talked to me about the flute. You know, they said that they were maybe feeling some negative thoughts, and the flute kind of alleviated that and took that from them. They asked me questions of the creation story of the flute. They asked me how to make a flute. And with all these questions and this positive influence, you know, I put that right back into the flute and right back into the storytelling of it. And I went out and I sought out the knowledge and gave elders a sema, which is a sacred tobacco. You know, whenever we ask, we give that sacred sema, that tobacco. And this will be the creation story of this one. A long time ago in a village, there was a young man. And this young man, he was good at all kinds of things. He was good at hunting, fishing. He was good at gathering. And he would do all these things, you know, and everybody kind of looked up to him. All of his young friends looked up to him. And one day he came back from a hunt and he was sharing everything with him. And he looked over and he saw this woman in his village, you know. And he really, really liked her, you know. He called her his heart's desire, you know. And every time that he would go up to her, and he would try to talk to her, you know, something would happen to him, and he would start to almost stutter, you know. He just didn't have it in him, you know. So he kind of would be on the outskirts of the village, and he would watch as other young men of courting age would go up to her and engage in conversation with her and give her gifts. You know, and this kind of frustrated him, you know. And he remembered he had heard of these teachings from an elder that there was this love medicine out there. And the love medicine was carried by the Ayabe. And the Ayabe is a huge albino buck that lives to the west. And he thought to himself, if I can find this Ayabe, I can somehow find this love medicine. And I can get this love medicine from this Ayabe, and I can present it to her. And then she would know how I feel about her. So he packed up a bunch of provisions, and he went out into the woods, and he found the biggest set of elk tracks that he could find. And he thought to himself, this is it. This has got to be the Ayabe. So he started to follow those tracks, and he led him deeper and deeper into the woods. And he would see a white flash out of the corner of his eye, and he would pull back his bow and arrow, and it would be gone. You know, pretty soon days went by, and still the same thing was happening. He would see that flash out of the corner of his eye. He'd pull back his bow and arrow just to see it come. After about 4 days of this, he was tired and exhausted. So he built a fire underneath a great cedar tree. And as he sat there listening to the crackle of the fire, you know, he was kind of half awake, half asleep, that in-between place of dreams that we visit. And he heard a sound in the night. That kind of lulled him to sleep. The next day, he woke up to a knocking. And when he opened up his eyes and he looked up into that cedar tree, he saw that there was a bird on that branch. And that bird was dancing on that branch, and it was knocking holes into that branch. And as it flew away, the wind picked up, and it made a sound. He heard that sound, and he knew instantly that that was the sound that he was looking for. So he got up and he reached up into that tree and he grabbed a hold of that branch and he broke it off. And as he stood there studying the branch, he tried to make that sound come from it. So he started to blow on it. Nothing. He was blowing on it this way. Nothing. He was even going like this, trying to get that wind across the holes to make that noise, and still nothing. So as he sat there thinking about it, he remembered his teachings again. You know, when you ask and you seek those answers, you offer sema to the spirits. And so he took out some sacred sema, some tobacco. He said a prayer to the spirit of that bird. And he fed that tobacco to the fire. And the fire took his prayers, turned it into smoke, and brought it up to the spirit world. And as he sat there waiting for an answer, he drifted off into sleep. And in his dream, that bird visited him. And he asked him, "What is it that you seek?" And the young man said, he told him about his dilemma. He told him about his heart's desire. He told him about the other young men in the village who were good at talking and offering gifts. And the spirit bird listened to him and took pity on him. And he decided to teach him how to make that noise, that sound. He decided to teach him how long to make the flute, the bibi guan. He told him where to put the holes on it. And he said, when you play that, when you blow your breath of life into that bibi guan, he said it'll wabi guan out the other side. It'll flower. Wabi guan is the Ojibwe word for flower. It'll wabi guan out the other end. And people will know. And so the young man began his constructing of the first bibi guan, the first flute. And as he was almost done, he needed to add a top piece to it. So he carved it out into the shape of a bird. Out of respect for the one who taught him how to make it. So he carved out a bird and put it on top. As the young man made his way home, every day he would stop and he would listen to the woods. He would listen to the sun coming through the trees. He would listen to the wind, through the needles of the pine tree. He would listen to the river and the creeks. He would listen to all these things. And he would listen to the sounds of the birds. And he would sit there and he would play. And he would mimic those. And he would learn. By the time he made it back to his village, he looked down and he could see everybody down there working. It was the changing of the seasons. Everybody in the village was doing something. Some people were dancing wild rice. Some people were gathering berries. Some people were drying out meat. Other people were smoking fish. Smoked fish, not drugs. And as he sat there and he looked down into the valley of all his people all working, he closed his eyes and he did as the spirit bird had instructed him. And he had the image of his heart's desire here. And he felt it here. And he blew into the bibi guan. And it wabi guan out into the world. Everybody that heard that sound stopped what they were doing because nobody had ever heard that before. The sound made its way down into the village and it finally made its way to the wigwam, which is the traditional home of the Anishinaabe people, to the wigwam of the young woman. And as soon as she heard that sound, she knew that that was for her. And she came out of her wigwam and she looked up towards that source of that sound and she could see that young man standing up there playing something. And she knew who he was. And she always wondered why he never talked to her. And as she went up and stood up next to him, she closed her eyes. And she was so amazed and overwhelmed that somebody could express so much emotion without uttering a single word. And as she listened, she realized that the music was intertwining their spirits together. Native American flute is very powerful, it's very healing. And I've been playing it for about 20 years now. And still my favorite place to play it is on the shores of Lake Superior. And I'm self-taught at it. So when I was in the woods playing it, you know, there was nothing but me and the spirits around. So there was nobody there to tell me that I was holding it wrong, that I was blowing into it wrong. And I was kind of able to learn my own technique as I kind of went on this path and this journey. And everybody that I had met along my travels has inspired me to keep learning more and to keep playing. And before you, I have, you know, maybe 20 flutes up here, and each one has its own spirit, and each one has its own song, its own voice, and its own story. You know, and obviously, for me to go through 20 flutes, we'd be here for a couple days talking about that. But I just want to be able to go through some of these songs and share some of these things of our culture. And another part of our culture is the wagon, the drum. You know, whenever we as Anishinaabe people start off anything, we usually start with the drum song. You know, so I'm going to ask my good friend Zach here to sing us a grand entry song, to let the Adazokan money do, the spirits that live here, know that we're going to, we'll be telling stories and having a good time. Miigwech. In the Anishinaabe culture, we have a lot of stories that have to do with shape-shifting. So as I went along in my flute journey, I made this mask. And I actually made it for another project we were doing up in the Chequamegon Bay area for a play called Animal Farm. And I was one of the narrators of it, and they all wanted us to take part and make our own pieces. And I had, this guy in mind for a long time, since my name being Pape Wagush, which means laughing fox. And I created it and made it, and then during the play, I was supposed to tear up some chickens. And I started to do that. We had a test audience out there, and there's all these people in the audience. They were 3rd and 4th graders. And there I was on stage with tearing up these sock puppet chickens, and I heard screaming in the audience. And I looked up to see like these 2 little kids just screaming their heads off. They thought I was really tearing up these chickens, And I said, oh, hey, it's okay. And I took off my fox mask, my fox head, and I said, no, I'm a human, it's all right. And then they started to cry even harder. I made it in a way to where it looks like the fox is playing the flute. Some of the first stories that I've heard, I learned from my teachers, my Nokomis, my Mishomis, my grandmothers, my grandfathers. And when I first started to learn these stories, I was just a little kid running all over the place, as little kids do. They run all over, they go all crazy. And as we were doing that, my teacher would say, Bazanian, Bazanian. Ombeelma, Bizintan, Namadabin. She'd say, be quiet, come over here and sit down. She used to say Bazanian to me so much that I actually thought that was my Indian name. It means be quiet. And she'd go, Bazanian, I said, yeah, right here. So there she would have all of us rambunctious kids sitting in a circle in front of her, And she would begin to tell us stories, and begin to educate us. And she used to talk about Winnebuju. And Winnebuju to the Anishinaabe people is a trickster. And he's a hero to us. And in a lot of ways, he teaches us how to live and how not to live, how to treat each other. These stories are embedded, and they go back so far, they go back so many generations that we don't even know how far they go back. Most of her stories that I learned when I was a little kid she would always start off, when the world was forever cold, and to me that always meant she was talking about the Ice Age. There's evidence that people had lived around the Great Lakes system some 11,000 years ago, and that's about the time of the melting of the Ice Age. More evidence says that our DNA had been on this continent 20,000 years ago. So, they talk about us coming across the land bridge. Well, that only happened 9,000 years ago. So there's all this new evidence all the time coming up, and all these new things. And it's up to us to learn as much as we can, But she would always say that back when the world was forever cold, But she would tell us about Winnebuju, who would go around and be a trickster to other people. And she said, when Winnebuju was just as big as you guys, maybe this big, she's like, he'd run all over the village, and he would tell everybody what to do, because he thought he knew everything, you're at that age, you know it all, right? Oh, I know. And he'd go up to the adults, and he would interrupt their work. Sometimes they'd be working on the birch bark canoe, And he'd start to say, oh, hey, adults, go in. He's like, I know how to do that better. Listen to me, I'll tell you how to do that better. You know, and he'd get in there and try to get away, you know, and they'd shoo him off. They'd say, Majan, little boujou, get out of here. You know, you're too young, you know. You don't know anything yet. You know, and this would get him all mad. Like, oh yeah, I know stuff. You know, and he'd go all over the village and he would do that. He'd interrupt the adults, you know, in their work. You know, whoever was smoking fish, he'd go and tell them what to do and how to do it better. Majan. You know, and after a whole day of all the villagers doing this to him, you know, all the elders and adults doing that to him, he was frustrated. And at the time, he was just a little guy. He would seek out the counsel of his nokomis, his grandmother. And so he went out to find her out in the woods picking meshkiki, picking medicines. And he said, hey, nokomis. He's like, I have a problem. He's like, maybe you can help me. And nokomis looked at Winnaboujou and she said, oh yes, Winnaboujou, what is it? And he began to tell nokomis his problem, you know, about how none of the adults would listen to him. And she goes, well, what are you asking me, Winnaboujou? He's like, well, nokomis, he said, I know you know all kinds of medicines. He said, is there a medicine out there that'll help me get smarter? And nokomis kind of thought about this for a little bit, and she said, you know what, Winnaboujou, I might be able to help you, but you'll have to come back later. I have to go out and find the medicine and gather it for you. And so Winnaboujou, he ran off into the woods, you know, and he was so excited, you know, he was having all these thoughts of these grandiose ideas about how everybody was going to listen to him because he was going to be the smartest man alive after taking all this smart medicine, you know. And so finally, you know, he was so excited he couldn't help it. He went back and he found nokomis back in the woods. He said, nokomis, did you find the medicine that'll help me get smarter? And she goes, yes, Winnaboujou, I got what you need right here. And she pulled out a pouch and she opened the pouch up. And she goes, here, I found these smart berries for you, Winnaboujou. Here, eat these, listen in, eat them. And Winnaboujou, he ran up there right away, ready to grab a whole handful of smart berries and start eating them. But then he looked at them. And then he kind of like got closer and he took a good smell of them. And he went, oh, nokomis. He said, that's rabbit poop. And she goes, oh, Winnaboujou, it's working. You're getting smarter already. Each one of our stories like that have some sort of a teaching, some sort of a value to it. You know, some of them may seem silly, but they've been with us, like I said, for countless generations. You know, and I only know of Bungi Etogo Ojibwe Maui. I only know just a little bit, you know, and it takes all of us, you know, coming together collectively and helping each other. You know, we were always helping each other. And I think we're starting to get back to that point in our humanity. One of the reasons I bring up that story when Winnaboujou was young, you know, I think about my own journey in the woods as a flute player. And as I was walking out into the woods and I was absorbing the pristineness of my environment, I would hear things out there, you know, I would hear the birds out there. You know, I had my first flute and I played the first note on it. And I fell in love with that first note so much that I just found myself playing that one note for hours. And I just stood there. And sometimes I wouldn't even play it. Sometimes I would just sit out there and listen. And I'd like to tell my students that, you know, it's always a good thing to respect your two-legged teachers, you know, your elders, you know, your parents, your aunts and uncles. But when you get out there into the woods, there's other teachers out there. You know, there's the four-legged, there's the winged creatures. You know, there's the ones who swim. And if you're quiet and you listen, you know, you can learn something from them. So as I sat out in the woods and I was listening, you know, to the environment around me, you know, I heard some squirrels running around, chittering and chattering, chasing each other around. And I thought, oh, here's something I'll scare them off with the flute, I'll imitate them. You know, and I started to do that on this flute. And I thought they would run off, but they didn't. They actually like came closer, and I kept playing, and they just came up closer, and they were doing their own chattering, you know, their own trills. And I tell my students and people when I do demonstrations that this is the first song that I learned on the flute, and it's called Ajitamo Wani. And if you, you'll be able to hear all these squirrels like chasing each other around the tree. This flute came to me from a friend of mine, a fellow tribal member. And a lot of times when I get flutes, people will gift them to me. Sometimes I trade for them. I make some really unique dream catcher artwork, some three-dimensional sculpture type stuff. And one of my friends, you know, he wanted one of those dream catchers, so I traded him for this one, and he offered this to me. He said, I want to give you this flute. He said, it doesn't have a name, but he's like, there's so many different things that I see in it. And when he offered it to me, I could tell what he meant, because the first thing that I saw was a gigu. You know, I saw a fish on here. And then this part where the bird is supposed to be, I kind of thought of that as like a cloud, almost like it was shape-shifting, you know, like maybe it's a horse, maybe it's a bird, maybe it's an eagle, you know, somewhere in between. And then as I looked at it and further, I turned it this way. And then when I turned it this way, I could see the cuckoo, which is actually the Ojibwe word for owl, you know. And when I talk about our traditional stories and the shape-shifting element and aspect to it, this song came to me on this flute. And this song is called Shapeshifter. has a different story. And when I sought out some knowledge from some elders, they talked about like being able to travel with these instruments and being able to send people to different universes, different dimensions. And I noticed that when I play, like flute music is very soothing and it puts people to sleep. Some of my favorite people that like to invite me to play for them are, kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers, yoga instructors, chiropractors. That's kind of my demographic right there. And I always tell people if they buy, I got flute music, and if they get some of it, just don't listen to it late at night while you're driving. I don't want to be associated with any accidents in that sense. So it's very soothing, and it can bring you to different places, and I've seen it firsthand, of the healing aspect of these flutes. And this flute came to me at a time when I was in a dark place, and we just had my daughter, and we had a home birth with her. We wanted to do everything traditional, because the Native American peoples were denied their culture and their religion, until 1978. That's when we had the freedom of religion for indigenous people here in America. And when you think about that, 1978, that's only 43 years ago, that we've been allowed to speak our language and we've been allowed to embrace our culture. So when we had my daughter, we wanted to bring some of that back. So we had a home birth. I was right there to help take her out, and it was a hard birth for my partner. I had to get right down there and help pull. Come on out here. The world is waiting for you. And we did ceremony with like her afterbirth. We did ceremony with her belly button. They always say, when the belly button falls off, you take that and put it in your medicine, so that when they get older, they can use that in their medicines. And another thing we did was name her in Ojibwe. For us Ojibwe, we have our English names. I have an English name, Michael Charette, and then I have an Indian name, a spirit name, which is Bapewa Bush. And now that name is only supposed to be used in ceremony for me, the spirits, and the Creator. And when we named my daughter, we didn't give her an English name, we gave her an Ojibwe name. Plus, then we had a ceremony where she was gifted a name by the spirits. And that worked as sort of a baptism, if you will, protection. So we ended up naming her Indeaki, which means my heart of the earth, in Ojibwe. And as things go, people don't always work out in life, and things didn't work out between my partner, and she ended up leaving, And I must have broke her heart so bad because she left all the way to France, and she took our daughter with, and I had let that, go because she had dreams too, And so my daughter was raised over in Europe, and now she speaks French fluently, and all these beautiful gifts and opportunities for her are happening right now in her life. But at the time, I didn't realize, as a man, as a father, I didn't realize the effect that would have on me losing my child in that way. Being there from her first breath, and then being there almost every day for the first 5 years, So when she was gone, it left a huge hole in me. And I had found the flutes, and I kind of would close my eyes and I would play this flute. And I would play it so long and so much that I almost felt like I was walking beside her. I almost felt like I could see her and her mother walking the streets of Paris. And I felt like I was there. And I had always thought, like whenever I play it, I try to keep my thoughts good. Just like the stories, you keep your thoughts good and pure. You think about people in a good way. And I thought that if she was sleeping over there on the other side of the world, that somehow she could hear the flute that I was playing for her. This flute, this song is called Indeaki. which means my heart of the earth. My daughter, and missing her, it reminds me of us reclaiming that which was lost, And I was saying earlier, like each one of us just knows a little bit, and it takes all of us coming together collectively, to help each other. And I helped write this play over this last year called Anishinaabe that we put on at Lake Superior, Big Top, Chautauqua, and we'll be doing the show again. But I had people from all different reservations come in and help, and we have the show almost all in the Ojibwe language. We stick to a lot of the traditional stories, and we have the Blue Canvas Orchestra, which is Big Top's house band, involved. And it's a good mixture of two musics and two cultures coming together to really create a beautiful process. And we all learn from each other while doing this show, Anishinaabe. And in the show, we talk about, the indigenous people and the reclaiming of our culture and of our spirits. And in there, we have a segment dedicated to the missing and murdered indigenous women movement. Right now, we talk about the residential schools. We talk about how the Catholic Church and the government would take the children from the homes and would deny them their language and would cut their hair and kill the Indian and save the man, was the mentality of the United States at the time. And eventually that trickled down into the education system, and a lot of the educational systems today, still hold on to some of those old ways, and again, it's up to us today to recognize these things and to help come away with a better understanding. 20 years ago, 40 years ago, we wouldn't be able to have these conversations that we're having now, so it's open. And with that open conversation, we can find ways of dealing with this historical generational trauma, that not only affects the indigenous people, but all of us, I think, as Americans. And But we have songs of healing. You know, I talk about the MMIW movement, the residential boarding school movement. You know, we see a lot of unmarked graves now coming to light, and more and more people are being educated about that. And I'd like to ask my friend Zach here to do a healing song in remembrance of those people that, you know, that we have lost, those people that are still out there, you know, our sisters, our mothers, our aunts, you know, the children that are out there. So Zach, if you could do an honor song or a healing song for us, that would be minimal. While he's getting ready, I'll just talk about one more thing. When I came in, I said, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, you know, what's it like being native, indigenous, you know, and I'd like to break it down to a word, you know, in Dunaway, Maganigil. It means all of my relatives, you know, all of my relations. But it just doesn't mean like my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunts, uncles, cousins. You know, it goes beyond that. When they say in Dunaway, Maganigil, all of my relations, we're looking at the spirit that's in that tree, the spirit that's in those rocks, the spirit that's in that river. And at one time, you had a whole continent of people living here on Turtle Island, you know, which is what we used to call America, who all believed that same thing, that everything had a spirit. And when you have a whole society of people believing that and thinking that and feeling that, you know, it makes it that much harder for us to take. You know, we have been habitual offenders of the great law. Take only what you need. You know, so when people ask about what is it to be a Anishinaabe, I like to talk about that word and talk about our language in that way a little bit.
Yeah.
I see we're coming down to our timeline here, but there's still so many more flutes and so many more songs and so many more stories that I just want to keep going on, you know. I don't know, how do you guys feel? You guys okay out there? Keep going on, all right, we'll keep going then. There's a few more flutes that I really would like to share, and a few more drum songs too. This flute was given to me out of the spirit of love. And I was playing flute at Big Top Chautauqua way in the beginning of my journey. And I met this other flute player up there. And he's kind of like the godfather of flutes, you know, flute playing. His name was Carlos Nakai. And they were like, hey, you want to come up to Big Top Chautauqua and meet Carlos Nakai and have some dinner with him? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm so there, you know. I moved from street corners and kind of was working my way up, you know. And so there I was, in the presence of this great man, you know, Carlos Nakai, you know. And I started to talk to him about flute music. And I said, you know, I got one of your books, but I can't read it. I don't know how to read music. You know, and he had heard me flute around a little bit, you know, throw some flute loops for him. And he said, oh, he's like, you don't need to go through that stuff. He's like, whatever you're doing, he said, just keep doing it. He's like, you're doing great. You're doing fine. And I was like, oh, wow, you know, that meant a lot to me. Oh, yeah, all right. He's like, but I will tell you one thing. And I was like, yeah, what's that, you know? He goes, beware the woman that gives you a flute. And I was, what? I said, what, really? I said, why is that? He said, because. He said, I married the woman that gave me one. And he, you know, his wife was there. And they had a little giggle about it and stuff. And I was like, oh, you know, that's pretty funny, you know. So anyways, we did the show, you know, and made lifelong friends with Carlos. And, you know, 3 months later, there I was, you know, with this woman that I had been dating, you know. She goes, hey, she said, I have something for you. And I said, oh, really? I was like, well, what is it? And she's like, here you go. And I was like, oh, it was a box. And the box was in the shape of a flute, you know. And I was like, oh, no. And so I opened it up, and sure enough, there was this flute in there. And, you know, her name is Mainga Nakwe, which means the wolf woman, you know, Ojibwe. You know, my Ojibwe name is Bape Wagush, you know, which means laughing fox. My English names, you know, are Michael Charette. My middle name is actually Scooter Charette. You know, hippie parents in the 70s. I don't know why I named that. But, you know, so there I was, you know, with Wolf Woman. You know, and everything was going all right between the Wolf Woman and the Laughing Fox until one full moon, Wolf Woman tried to eat Laughing Fox. And he had to get away. I just had to get away. You know, but that happens in relationships, you know. And I told her, like, you know, like, whenever I play this flute, I'll always play it, you know, with love, you know. And I'll always play it with those good feelings because that's what I was taught and that's what I learned over the years. So, you know, her being the wolf woman, I had listened to the Echo Valley Wolf Pack, where I'm from. And I'd go out in the woods and I listened, you know, and I listened to the way that they would howl. And then I would try to imitate that. And that's where this song comes from. This song is called Mainga Nakwe, which means the wolf woman. And if you listen, you'll be able to hear those wolves in there. I play that on a full moon, sometimes I can hear somebody out there going, Scooter! I'll play one more flute song with this double drone, and then we'll do a traveling song for everybody here. And if anybody would like to come up afterwards and check out the flutes and have questions, I do have some flute music available up here, as well as some t-shirts that have some Laughing Fox stuff on it. So in case you're interested, they make great gifts, especially the flute music. You know, they make if you want to put your kids to sleep, your grandkids to sleep, your parents to sleep, this will do the trick. This flute, after I left the woods, I went to street corners. From street corners, I went to like bus stops and eventually like airports. And I really enjoyed airports because people would be moving from one place to the next so quick and so fast, you know. And as soon as they would hear that flute music, it would slow them down. And they would take a moment and they would listen. And it didn't matter like what country they were from or what language they spoke, because this spoke to them, you know. And I always think it's just so amazing to see that happen in real life. And I was at an airport in Philadelphia visiting my daughter, and I got stuck there Christmas Eve. And you know, when I play, I close my eyes and I go right back to the woods where I learned this, you know, this music. And after a couple hours of playing like that, I opened my eyes and there's a big circle of people around me. And as I looked at them closer, you know, I realized, you know, that they were kind of dirty and I could kind of almost smell them. And I realized that they were homeless folks that were stuck in their situation, you know. And I realized that the music had brought us together, you know, just in that moment, in that circle. You know, it didn't matter where they were from, you know. Of course, I thought about their situation. But as I got done playing, a man came up to me and he goes, "Hey, man." He's like, "My name is Curtis." He said, "That's some good flute playing." I said, "Oh, hey, thanks, Curtis. My name's Laughing Fox." And he looked at me really weird and he's like, "Hey, man, how'd you know my name was Curtis?" You know, and I'm from the woods. You know, we don't have much of that where I'm at. You know, so that kind of freaked me out. And I talked to him for a little bit more, you know, what I could anyway. And then I went back to playing the flute, and I watched them all kind of disperse and go by this bench or under it or wherever they were going. But just for that one night, you know, that one moment, this song brought us together. And it's got no title to this song, just that story. and listening, and it's always an honor for me to be able to come up here and be able to share some of the stories, culture, and language. So miigwech very much to you. We're going to finish today's session with a traveling song with my good friend Zach Hartlett. Miigwech again. once again, everybody, Miigwech for coming out and enjoying some of the flute music and Anishinaabe stories and culture. And I do have flutes up here, so if you have questions or just want to check out the different varieties of flutes that I have, some are made out of hardwood, some softwood. There's even a bone flute up here. I thought it was a wolf bone flute, but it turned out to be a cougar bone flute. Yeah. Oh yes.
Did you say you have CDs of the music?
Yes, I have CDs available up here if people would like, and I have a few shirts up here. I'll just display those at the end of the table. Miigwech again, everybody.